you can't help but think but empathy and compassion, and not the first things you normally think about when you think about a sheriff or a law enforcement officer, but those things have to be pretty high on your priority.
Well, I have compassion for reasons that I think are logical. You know, it's not just pure emotional. You know, I just think that, you know, my grandfather was a tremendous worker. He was a boiler maker for the Southern Pacific Railroad. The engines, the locomotives that ran those old steam locomotives, and, you know, that's ancient stuff now, but, you know, I'm near ancient myself. But the key is that he would go to work and just handle that stuff beautifully. And he was a man who got his engineering certificate from a mail-in school in Chicago, and he was living in Albuquerque, New Mexico. That's where he was born. My father's side is all from New Mexico. And what was great about him is that he was responsible, where my father, as you probably figured out, wasn't that responsible. But as a grandparent, he went to work in his 60s, like, you know, doing things that were important. And so if those of you who don't know what a boiler is, you know, where you put the water in the cabinet in a locomotive, and the coal is underneath, and it heats up the water, and the steam comes out, and that's what drives the wheels of a steam locomotive. That's what he did. He replaced those boilers because they rusted. So the thing that I learned about is that when he got paid on Fridays, because of his mentally ill son, he couldn't handle it, you know, emotionally, that one kid turned out that way. And so he'd go get drunk. He'd cash his paycheck, he'd go get drunk, and my grandmother and I'd go out looking for him at times, and sometimes he was in jail. And the point is that the way I work this story out with compassion and common sense at the same time is that he never recovered from his alcoholism. But at the same time, his goodness was not obviated by his alcoholism. He basically stuck with the payments of the house and stuck with taking care of that son and his wife, and ultimately brought me into his milieu of responsibility. And I just looked at him and said, "You're a rock." I says, "If it wasn't for an alcoholic grandfather, I wouldn't be here today." Because he gave me a chance to see his success and his failure at the same time. But his failure was not something that was so overwhelmingly debilitating that he was hurting anybody except himself. And see, that's kind of like the lesson you learn when you're involved with people who are fundamentally good, but they can't quite get a grip on the tragedies that they own within themselves.